Everything that could go wrong does. It's a wild ride. Hated it. Okay. Debacle. All right. We'll talk about that later. Fishy vibes. Doing the research for it, I was like, wow. 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 Okay, here we go. Hello, friends. Welcome back to Disabled in Nature, where we talk about all things that are disabled in nature, and sometimes we might even go outside. My name is Marissa, and I am disabled. This video is one that is 2 years in the making. If you're new here, you might not know that I am a full-time power wheelchair user, and I have been trying to get a wheelchair accessible van for about 2 years now. You might think, Marissa, I see wheelchair accessible vans all over the place. They can't be that hard to get. Why did it take you 2 years? I'm gonna tell you. I have a form of muscular dystrophy called FSHD, and I have slowly been losing my ability to walk over time. There are a variety of issues that this has caused for me, but in this video, we're going to focus on transportation. If you're interested in hearing me rant a little bit more about the overarching issues that transportation causes for the disability community, you can watch the videos in the playlist that this video will be in that are kind of ramping up to this one. But basically, especially where I live in the United States, public transportation is lacking, and accessible public transportation is even more lacking. In order to live your most independent life in most places in the United States, you need your own private transportation. And if you use a 400-pound power wheelchair like I do, getting your own private transportation is really, really expensive. Like 6 figures expensive. I don't have that kind of money. So 2 years ago, I set out to try and get support from the state of Michigan to help pay for adaptations on a vehicle of my own. I'll just give you a short little rundown of my situation, my disability, and what led me to this point of needing a wheelchair accessible vehicle. So like I said, I have a progressive muscle condition that causes me to lose strength throughout my body over time. And about 5 years ago, I became a full-time power wheelchair user. My first power chair was a portable, foldable travel chair that I would get in and out of the back of my Honda Fit using a little crane lift thing. This worked pretty well for the first year or two that I had this set up, but like I said, my condition's progressive, so it got harder and harder over time, and I knew that I was going to, one, need to get a more custom power chair to fit my needs of my body and my disability, and two, if I wanted to leave my house with that power chair, I was going to need a vehicle with a ramp in it. There is a program in every state in the United States called vocational rehabilitation. In Michigan, it's called Michigan Rehabilitation Services, or MRS, as they shall henceforth be known as in this video. The purpose of this department is to provide funding for services that help disabled people gain and maintain employment. So if you need funding for equipment to help with your disability to do your job, or specialized training to move forward in your job or to get a job, they are the people that you should be able to go to get support for that kind of thing. And in theory, this is a wonderful service. In practice, I hit some barriers along the way, we'll just say that. This video has been a very, very long time in the making. I actually initiated the process to start to attempt to get this funding for this vehicle on May 9th of 2022. I received my fully equipped van on April 22nd, 2024. Just a couple of weeks ago. I started this process more than a year before I even started this channel. I've been taking little clips along the way since I started the channel last July. So it took a really long time, and I hope you stick around to find out why, because it's a wild ride, and I think it's a really interesting glimpse into what people with disabilities have to go through just to live our daily lives that you might not think about. Before I did this process, I didn't think about how much struggle or hardship someone in that adapted van had to go through to get it. And I think it's an experience worth talking about. This is gonna be a really long video, probably a two-parter, so grab a snack, a fun little beverage, and come along with me on this wild ride. It has many twists and turns. Everything that could go wrong does. But I promise you, it turns out great in the end. So get comfy as I take you back to May 9th of 2022 when this whole thing started. I don't actually have any footage from back then because this all started before I even had a channel. This will have to do. Is it just wrapping paper flipped around and taped to the wall? You know, maybe, but we do what we can with what we have. Get my notes. So I have our first date written here. May 9th, 2022. That is when I filled out my initial application form and was contacted by an MRS counselor. If you do the voc rehab process, you will submit an application online and then you will be assigned a counselor and they will reach out to talk to you to determine what your needs are, what services they can provide for you, etc. So I had this initial meeting on May 9th, 2022. Next. So our next event happened on June 6th, 2022. I took the month to gather all my medical paperwork. You need to prove your disability. And MRS also needed some forms of theirs filled out and signed by my doctor. So I went and I got a doctor's appointment in this time and I got those forms filled out and I submitted all of those. Next. The next date was a big one, and it was when I got approval for eligibility for services, and that happened on July 8th. Yay! So that's a really big thing because if they determine that you're not eligible for services, your case stops and they're not going to help you any further. So when I got that first letter saying you're eligible for services, I thought, amazing, we are on the right track. And you'll see how that goes for me. So after I was deemed eligible for services is when things really started to go off the rails because they started asking for a letter from my employer. And to this day, I'm not quite sure why they needed it. I'm going to be honest with you. The next couple of months until, in fact, September 28th was spent me going back and forth with my counselor and my boss's boss to determine what exact wording needed to be in this letter so that MRS management would approve it. And so on September 28th, the letter got approved. So that was a really big thing. It had taken, 6-7 weeks to get that approval? And it was insane. It was like just writing back and forth about what literally this says and it needs to say or, weird stuff like that. I hated it. Okay, so after this, I was in a little bit of a waiting period. Again, you're going to see that is a theme throughout this process. But on October 17th, I got an email from my MRS counselor. And this email basically said that she had been talking with her management and they had decided that I need to go through an evaluation with their internal occupational therapy office. And we're just going to call it BND. I don't know what that stands for, but they assigned me an OT that worked in BND and they were going to work with me to do an evaluation of my workspace and things to get justification for the van. In order to do anything through the state, you need to sign consent forms. So the amount of consent forms that I signed throughout this process is truly dizzying. So October 17th was when I was sent the consent forms for the occupational therapist from BND to reach out to me. So up until now, my entire case has been about getting this van. And sometime in October, so sometime in this area, I learned that my insurance wasn't going to cover as much of this power chair. I didn't have this power chair at the time, and I was trying to get it while I was doing all of this van process. So somewhere in this area, I found out that my insurance wasn't going to cover as much as this chair as I needed it to. And this chair cost $42,000. So that was an issue. Sometime in here is when I learned this, and I had the issue resolved by October 31st. I was just going to switch insurances at the top of the year at 2023, and then that was going to solve it. We'll make this a little concurrent timeline. Wheelchair / insurance debacle. Okay? I know you can't read that, but that's what it says. My part, the insurance part of this, was resolved on October 31st. Resolve. And so now I just needed MRS's help paying for the lift feature. The feature on my chair that makes it do this. This feature right here, not covered by insurance, but very useful. So I needed their help to pay for this lift, which was about $1,600. And that really threw a wrench into this whole situation that, had I known what it was going to do, I would have just paid for the lift myself. All right, so that takes us to November 21st. When I hadn't heard anything for a few weeks, so I reached out to my counselor, and she said, I have a meeting today with BND to discuss your case, because they needed to discuss it before the lady from BND talked to me. MRS meeting with BND. So, just as a refresher, I signed the consent forms to work with BND on October 17th. It's now November 21st, and she's just now meeting with her. It's been a month. During this time, I am going to work every single day, having to load and unload my travel chair, stand up. Winter is approaching, so I'm getting really itchy. Things are getting harder. I'm losing strength in my right arm, which is very important for getting the chair in and out of the car. Things are just dragging on. Okay, here we go. So they have this meeting, and then there's the Thanksgiving holiday. And then on December 5th, I meet with the occupational therapist from BND. We talk about all kinds of things. She was very, very thorough. We talked about my work environment, my wheelchair situation, my car situation. I sent her pictures of my workstation, and she puts it all together into a report that she's going to send to MRS that they can then use for justification of why I need the van. Okay? Okay. We're gonna flip-flop sides. So I have this initial meeting with BND on December 5th, and then it's the Christmas holiday, so absolutely nothing gets done. So we're jumping forward to the top of 2023. Okay? It was actually easier to write from this side, so I'm gonna switch back. Don't worry about it. So the next thing I have is January 13th. And this is the day that I confirmed with my insurance and with my MRS counselor that my new insurance is going to cover this chair, but not the seat lift function, so I need assistance with that. So I sent my counselor an email saying, I will need assistance with the seat lift in addition to the van. So I tell my MRS counselor on January 13th, I need support for the wheelchair lift. And she's like, absolutely, we can get this done. There's justification for that written in the BND report. Oh, somewhere in here, the BND report is finalized. So the BND process was actually very efficient because I started it on December 5th, and the report was finalized at some point before January 13th. Okay, so now my MRS counselor has their own internal occupational therapist report, including all of the different things that I might need to make my work situation as accessible as possible, including the van, to get this wheelchair to work, because this wheelchair weighs 415 pounds, and there's no way it was going in my Honda Fit, all right? We'll talk about that later. The next thing that happened was on February 10th. February 10th. That's how you spell February, right? If that's not how you spell February, don't come for me. There was something happening behind the scenes that I was not privy to. Something in this month here, specifically. I think something screwy had been happening all along since the beginning, but something specifically in this time here led my counselor to, on February 10th, apparently, to really be pushing this idea that I should get official accommodations through my employer. Now, up until this point, I had just been working with my supervisor one-on-one, and that's kind of how accommodations work, right? There is no standard official accommodations process that you need to go through your job. In fact, disclosure of a disability is 100% voluntary. It's often necessary in order to get the accommodations that you need, but it's not required. There's not much disclosure needed in my case. I use a wheelchair, it's very obvious. My counselor started making a really big deal about this, and I was like, well, I haven't had any issues with my employer, and also I don't see what this has to do with the van, and I still don't really. I still don't. My guess is that her management was just giving her such a hard time behind the scenes that she was looking for any sort of further justification for my situation, which I'm not sure why she needed. I use a 400-pound power chair. Public transportation was not adequate. I need to be able to get places with this chair that they paid for. So I don't understand the problems that she was having, and I don't quite know what they were because I wasn't privy to that information or to those meetings. But somewhere in here, that really started coming to a head, and it really caused some pretty intense communication issues, I think, between me and my counselor. I was getting increasingly frustrated with the situation. Look at this timeline. May 9th is when I initiated this process. And I was under the assumption that, okay, maybe this will take 6 months. I'll have the van before winter, before the snow hits, before this gets dangerous for me. And so now we're in February, and I know that in order to move forward with this process, I need to go through, I need driver's rehabilitation evaluations, and I need to get fitted for the van, and I know that I have all these steps that I need to go through. And we're at February, and we haven't even started doing that. I don't even have an individualized plan for employment yet. And if I haven't said it already, an individualized plan for employment, or IPE, is the agreement that they write up that says, these are the things we have agreed to support you with, and this is what you need to do, and what we're going to do for you to help you move forward with your employment. So I don't even have that yet, and in that plan should be detailed all of the things to get the van, right? Okay, moving forward, I'm slowly falling off the screen. I threw another little tiny bump in the road because on February 27th, and if I haven't, made this really clear, this is all tied to your employment. And so far, it had been tied to my specific employer, my specific job. So when on February 27th, I told my counselor that I had gotten a new job, I thought this was going to be a big, big problem. Turns out it wasn't. We're going to have some rapid fire events happen here. So we were talking about the new job. All this time, I'm still going through this process of getting this wheelchair. And now I'm going to start a new job. So on March 1st, 2023, I hadn't got an update on where we were at as far as getting MRS support to cover the seat lift for this wheelchair, so I emailed the vendor we were working with, and I was like, hey, just making sure you got the paperwork. And then I got an email back from my counselor asking me not to email the vendor anymore because I was causing confusion, and that she would tell me when there was going to be an update. Thank you for your patience. I can't tell you how much this set me off. Observe. Be patient. When was I not patient? Was it in this month? Was it here in this 6 to 7 week span? Was it in this month? Was it in this month? How about this month? Or this month? When was it that I was anything but patient, and all I did was ask for updates on my case that was very urgent for me, in which I had not heard a response from people for 2, 3, 4 weeks. The amount of times I was told to be patient through this process, this one was the straw that broke the camel's back. So on March 2nd, the next day, I reached out to the Client Assistance Program, henceforth here known as CAP. CAP is the third-party organization that is also mandated by the Rehab Act of 1973 to exist alongside state vocational rehabilitation programs that helps people through the system when they're having a hard time. I would have contacted them earlier, but my supervisor, the one who told me about the program, didn't tell me about it until right about like here. So on March 1st, I hit my breaking point. And on March 2nd, I reached out for help. And on March 3rd, my counselor sent me my completed IPE without anything in it about a van whatsoever. This IPE is the final document in your case that like sets the ball rolling for getting you set up with the services they're going to give you. And as far as I could tell from mine, the van was not included as a service they were going to help me with. It included stuff about the lift for this chair, which was great. Not a mention anywhere about the van. And then on March 6th, I started my new job. We filled up our timeline here. Let's recap. Clearly this is not the end. I really should get a longer pointer. On May 9th, 2022, I submitted my initial application and had my intake meeting for MRS. A month later, I got all my paperwork submitted. A month later, I was deemed eligible for services. Woo! In this 6 weeks, we puttered about getting a letter from my employer. After letter approval, we took 3 weeks to decide that I needed to be evaluated by their internal occupational therapy department. Somewhere in here was the great wheelchair insurance debacle of 2023, which I will discuss in a future video sometime. A month after I signed the consent forms for them to talk to BND, they talked to BND. A couple weeks after that, I met with BND. About a month after that, BND finalized the report. And on January 13th, I confirmed everything for this wheelchair. So a month after we confirmed wheelchair things, the weird stuff started going on. We're gonna call this time fishy vibes. This is when we started getting real fishy vibes. On February 27th, I told them about my new job. It didn't affect anything, thank God. March 1st, I was told to be patient for the very last time. March 2nd, I reached out to the Client Assistance Program. March 3rd, I received my completed individualized plan for employment without anything about the van in it. And on March 6th, I started my new job. I think that this is about as good a time as any to pause and make you wait for a part 2. In part 2, we finally get to start being evaluated for the van. I'll tell you all about how my Client Assistance Program advocate is magical and how much she helps me. And we'll actually start to get to see some video clips of this process as I'm undergoing it, because I started this channel in July of 2023. So far, we're at March 6th, 2023. Stay tuned. This story has a good ending, I promise. And I hope this was all interesting to you. It's been mostly cathartic for me. I'm gonna be saving this timeline forever because doing the research for it, I was like, wow. All right. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to tune in for part 2. Don't forget to get outside. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.